Hello, and welcome back to Horror Drift Stories. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading them. If you enjoy drifting into dark and unsettling stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now, get comfortable, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story 1. I still remember the first time I saw him, because it was one of those mornings when everything feels slightly out of place. I was running late to class, half awake and annoyed at myself, when I spotted a guy walking like he didn't care what anyone thought. It was cold, the kind of cold that makes you keep your hands buried in your pockets, and he was wearing knee-length brown shorts with Velcro sandals. No socks, just bare legs, like it was summer. On top, he had a thick jacket zipped up to his neck. The first thought that hit me was automatic. There's no way this guy is local. He stopped me as if we already knew each other. "Hey, sorry," he said in Spanish. "Do you know where the humanities classrooms are?" What surprised me wasn't the question. It was the Spanish. It was fluent. Not perfect, but close enough to make me blink. He rolled his R's a little too long, but it wasn't the typical tourist accent. The strange part was the ending of his sentences. Something familiar. Like I'd heard that rhythm before, somewhere far from where we were standing. "Aren't you cold?" I asked, pointing at the obvious problem. Shorts and sandals in this weather. He laughed, and his breath fogged the air. "Yes," he admitted. "I'm freezing, but my dad gave me these shorts just for this trip. He made me promise I'd send him pictures wearing them on the first day." I couldn't help smiling. Yeah, parents can be like that. Same building, same hallway. From that day on, we started seeing each other every Tuesday in social psychology. At first it was just a nod, a quick hey as we came in. Then it became talking during breaks. Then talking after class. For weeks, we did that without me even knowing his name. It sounds ridiculous now, but it didn't feel weird at the time. We just clicked, in a simple way. We made fun of the professor's dramatic pauses. We pointed out the same people every week, like we were watching a show. Sometimes we'd step outside afterward and smoke. I'd buy a Peel Roja cigarette and joke, "Look, they kicked your people out and left us tobacco as a native gift." He'd light a Marlboro and laugh like it was the best joke he'd heard all week. It was easy. And then one day he didn't show up. I noticed, but I didn't think too much about it. People miss class. People get sick. People oversleep. But after class, the professor pulled me aside. "Have you seen Adam?" he asked. "Who?" "Adam," he said, looking at me like I was pretending. "The foreign guy you're always with outside class." "Ah," I said, feeling stupid. "No, I haven't seen him." That same day during lunch, he appeared like nothing happened, but he looked different. He wore wide-leg pants and a Miami Dolphins cap, bright blue. The color made his eyes look even lighter, but what I really noticed were the dark circles under them. He looked like he hadn't slept, like he'd been awake for days, and didn't want to talk about why. He spotted me sitting alone and walked over with a weak smile. "What's up, parcero?" he said. "How's it going?" "Good, man," I answered. "And you?" "You were missed in class," I said. "The professor almost cried when you didn't show." He laughed, but it didn't fully reach his face. He ate a ham sandwich slowly, like it didn't taste like anything, and left half of it untouched. "I'd never seen you in baggy pants," I said. "They look good on you." He shrugged. "I stopped wearing them because my dad said baggy clothes lead you down a bad path." He snorted. "But screw the old man. I'm thousands of miles away. and he's still annoying me. I pointed to the cap. Nice one, favorite team? Nah, he said. I just like this cap more. In theory, I'm for the Lions, but they never win, and blue matches my eyes. I laughed. You're a Disney princess, Cinderella. He grinned for real then. Shut up. You're the one with the charcoal complexion. That's how it was with him. Small jokes, quick insults, comfort that felt automatic. We left the cafeteria with two girls behind us, both of them beautiful, both of them pretending not to stare. Adam was obsessed with Colombian women, in a way that was half funny, half embarrassing. Outside, we met up with my friends, Carlos, his girlfriend Natalia, and a couple others. What else is there for the head besides caps? I joked and nodded toward Adam. This is Adam. His face says we need to get wild today. Someone suggested drinks. Others said they had class. The group split the way groups always split. Carlos said something that surprised me. Guys, he said, I got invited to a party. Carlos was the kind of guy who always seemed distant, like he was present, but not fully. I had never been to a party with him. He leaned in, lowering his voice. It's far. We'd need a ride, but it's gonna be incredible. I didn't even hesitate. Let's go. We ordered a car through an app. When the driver arrived, he looked at us in the rearview mirror and asked, You're going to La Calera, right? Don't worry, I'll tip you well. The ride took forever. 2 hours of winding roads, city lights fading behind us, the air getting colder as we climbed. When we finally pulled up, the house wasn't a house. It was a mansion. Huge gates, tall walls, bright lights spilling into the driveway, music vibrating through the ground. It's the induction party for the University of the Mountain, Carlos said. Inside, there were students everywhere. A DJ in the main room played electronic music. People danced in costumes, masks, glitter. It felt like a different world. Rich people pretending to be free. Carlos spread his arms. Enjoy whatever you want. Make yourselves at home. Adam took it all in with wide eyes, part amazed, part suspicious. I worried for a moment about how I'd get home later, but the room was full of beautiful girls, and that worry evaporated fast. By 10, the party was at its peak. We drank wine Carlos brought. We danced. The night got blurry at the edges, the way nights do when alcohol takes over, and time stops being clear. That's when Adam met Sandra. She stood out instantly. Long, wavy hair down to her waist, dark eyes, full lips, the kind of body that moves like it owns the rhythm. Adam couldn't look away from her. It was obvious. He was hooked. After that, my memories are broken pieces. Too many drinks, too much noise, too many moments slipping away. I only remember waking up at home and seeing sunlight. My head was pounding. My mouth tasted like old liquor. Then Adam was shaking me. Parse, he said, urgent. I have to go. Open the door for me. I opened it, half asleep. He left. That was it. I didn't see him again that week. I was buried in assignments and dropping off resumes at restaurants because I needed cash. Life kept moving like nothing happened. The next week, on Thursday, I found Adam eating lunch alone. He looked tired again, but not just tired. He looked wrong, like something inside him had shifted, and he didn't know how to settle back into his own body. What's up, parcero? I asked. How'd you end up that day? He chewed slowly. Good, but I don't know. I felt weird. like it was the budget version of the parties they throw at my school. I laughed. This guy. He leaned closer. Here's the thing. Here, rich people feel like foreigners. He paused, eyes narrowing. Do you want to see the real Bogota? Sure, I said. That's why I'm here. We started drinking before leaving campus. We bought one of those plastic bottles of cachaça shaped like a coconut. It was sweet at first, then dry and aggressive, strong enough to make your throat tighten. Adam took one smell and frowned. What the hell is this? A drink for real men, I said, taking a sip and pretending it didn't burn. Someone passed a pipe around. I took a hit. Adam refused. He looked uneasy, like his brain was already tired of surprises. All right, I told him. Real Bogota means downtown. We took Transmilenio. The red bus was half empty. We sat near the front. In the back, a homeless man sat surrounded by plastic bags, and the smell rolling off him was strong enough to make my eyes sting. We tried to keep talking anyway. Normal stuff. That party. Sandra. How did it go with her? I asked. Sandra, he said quietly. We danced a lot. She was very flirty. He rubbed his hands together. It scared me a little. Scared you? I laughed. Man, she had her eyes all over you. You hesitated. You messed up. You think so? Of course. But it's in the past. Downtown hit us like a wall. Noise, smoke, people packed into sidewalks and corners. The bars near the universities were full of students drinking and shouting over music. I guided Adam through streets stained with paint from recent protests, past luxury hotels where homeless people dug through trash like they belonged to a different planet. Eventually, we reached a tiny door tucked between a pharmacy and a restaurant. A blue light glowed from inside. They checked IDs. He's a foreigner, I said. Passport's fine, right? As long as he's over 18. The guy answered. The problem is the police. We went in. Inside, there was a central bar like an island. Tables around it. Music low and heavy. I told Adam, I'll put half for a bottle if you put the other half. He waved it off. I'll pay for the first one. They brought a metal bucket full of ice, with aguardiente, lemons, 2 shot glasses. We started drinking. I ordered water too. Habit. I'd learned the hard way that water can save you from disaster. 2 girls nearby kept glancing at us. I invited one to dance. Adam stayed behind. The girl moved close, sensual, fearless. We danced until her friend came, urgent, saying they had to leave. I tried to say goodbye politely, but the moment tipped into something stronger, and we kissed like we'd known each other longer than an hour. When she left, Adam stared at me. How did you do that? It's nothing, I said, shrugging. It's just feeling the vibe. Then I pointed. And speaking of vibe, look, Sandra had just walked in with 2 friends. Adam went still, like his brain froze. Close your mouth, I whispered. You're drooling. Go say hi. He practically ran to her. They hugged. They talked close. He waved me over, but I pointed at the bottle like I was stuck. And he understood. The rest of the night, Adam stayed with Sandra. I danced a bit longer, but I got bored. The energy was wrong without my friend. I said goodbye and left. Right before I went, Adam grabbed my hand and pushed something into it. It looked like a transparent pearl. Take it, he said. Stay. Have a better time. Sandra smiled. This is the real party, she said softly. I opened my hand and stared at it. It didn't look like a drug. It didn't look like anything I understood. No, I said quickly. I can't. I have to go. But thanks. I left. I went home and slept hard. After that, Adam and I still went out sometimes, but something about him had changed. He got quieter, distracted, like he was listening to something nobody else could hear. Weeks passed without me seeing him again. Then, one day, I ran into him on campus, and he looked panicked, eyes wide, breathing fast, skin pale. I swallowed the worms. He blurted, those pearls, those pearls. Sandra, no, they're worms. They're worms. I grabbed his shoulders. Hey, calm down. What are you talking about? His words came out like he couldn't slow them down. I see worms, he said. Worms everywhere. That day I swallowed one. They were eggs. They were eggs. I got him to the infirmary. A psychologist listened. The face she made wasn't confusion. It was the kind of expression people make when they've seen this before. We have to refer him, she told me. They made me leave after a while. 2 or 3 days later, Adam called. Come, Parcero, he said quietly. I want to say goodbye. I didn't understand, but I went. He gave me an address in the north of the city. A big white door, tall bushes, the kind of house that looks like it was built to keep the world out. Inside, everything was spotless. White walls, clean air, too clean. Adam appeared wearing pajamas that looked too big, like they weren't his. He had the same sandals from the first day. He wore the dolphin's cap, but now it was frayed, ruined, though somehow still clean. His eyes looked dead, dark circles carved into his face. I hugged him. Bro, what happened? He spoke without drama now, like he was beyond panic. Parse, they were worms, he said. What Sandra gave me was worms. He told me there was a cult. People who ate worms. People who said once you ate them, you understood things you weren't supposed to understand. I didn't believe him at first. I thought he was sick. I thought he was having some kind of breakdown. Then he repeated the strangest line, over and over, like it was the only thing he was sure of. The main worm, he whispered. The monster is in the letter. The worm is in the letter. The worm is in the letter. 2 days later, I got a call from a private number. A man with a strong American accent spoke like he was trying to stay calm. He asked me everything, how I knew Adam, where I'd seen him, when, who he'd been with. He told me Adam had escaped from a care home just before his parents arrived in the country. I didn't know where Adam lived. I'd never been to his house before that last visit. The only place I could offer was the university. After the call, Adam's last words kept echoing in my head. The letter. La lettre. I remembered my most streetwise friend, my most narrow friend, who always talked about la lettre, like it was common knowledge. I called him. Hey bro, I said. Weird question. You always mention la lettre. What is it? He didn't laugh. He didn't ask why. Don't get nervous. He said, I know what you want. I'll take you. It's a place? Yes, sir. He said, walk with me. We met at a Transmilenio station I'd never used. The air was heavy. Homeless people everywhere, sitting or sleeping on the ground. My friend looked at my red shirt and immediately shook his head. Cover that up, he warned. If you don't want problems. Why? Pass, red, green, blue, anything can get you jumped here. Don't invite trouble. I listened. We walked away from the station, deeper into streets that felt like they'd been forgotten by the city. Makeshift shelters leaned against graffiti-covered walls. People stared with eyes that didn't care about you as a person, only as an opportunity. My friend glanced at me. I never thought you'd get into this, he said. But we see faces, not hearts. We reached a street blocked off with fences. At the entrance were men in caps and sports jerseys, tattoos creeping up their faces. Their posture made it clear. This wasn't a neighborhood you wandered into by accident. My friend stopped. "Welcome," he said quietly. "To the letter, to the L, to the Bronx, to the Cartucho." He pointed ahead. "I told them I was bringing you, but I gotta run errands. Keep your eyes open. Watch the looks." Then he left me there. I stepped forward, alone. The place was alive in the worst way. People sprawled on the ground with pipes. Others drank beer like it was breakfast. There were kids dancing who looked too young to be here. People approached me with soft voices and hard eyes. "We have everything," one guy said. "Everything you need." He opened his hand. Inside was a transparent pearl. My stomach dropped. Same shape, same look as the thing Adam tried to give me. He motioned me toward a house. I followed until my fear rose too high, and when he looked away for a second, I slipped through a different doorway. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. Inside was a patio that felt like an empty alley. The floor was broken, and in the ground there was a hole. The smell around it was damp and metallic. I stepped closer and looked down. Eyes stared back. Not human eyes. Reptile eyes. Cold, unblinking, waiting. Panic shot through me, and I ran, searching for another way out. I pushed into a room with white tiles on the walls. Small squares like an old clinic bathroom. The floor was slick with fresh blood. A man stood inside, chopping meat. Not cutting like a butcher cutting steak. Chopping like someone breaking something down into pieces, small enough to disappear. He tossed chunks to his right without looking, humming softly like he was doing chores. I backed out, breath held tight, and moved faster. Another room. Dark, chapel-like. Rows of chairs faced a golden box in the center, like a strange altar. The air in the hallway wasn't air anymore. It felt thick, like breathing through rot and bleach. The floor slanted toward a drain clogged with gray hair and something that glittered like teeth. I looked up and saw a torso hanging from a hook, skinless, swaying slightly. My mind tried to reject what I was seeing, tried to label it as a nightmare, but the smell made it real. I stepped backward, and my heel hit something soft. A pile of blue denim rags, the same shade as Adam's jeans. Beside them was a plastic bin, overflowing with IDs and passports from all over the world. Faces stared up at me, smiling, frozen, erased. And in that moment, I understood something that made my stomach turn colder than fear. This place didn't just swallow people. It processed them. It turned them into nothing. The reptile eyes in the pit weren't a rumor. They weren't a story told to scare tourists. They were part of the system, the final step. A beast living under the city, fed by what disappeared above. I moved toward the golden box, because something in me needed to know if Adam's words meant anything. When I opened it, the smell hit first, burnt plastic and sweetness, like candy melted on a hot spoon. Inside, curled like it belonged there, was a worm the length of my forearm. Thick, pale, wet. It was positioned above a receptacle, and that receptacle was overflowing with pearls. Thousands of them. A harvest. A pile that made my skin crawl, because now I knew what those pearls were for. I didn't stay long enough to think. Getting out wasn't simple. The alley outside had become a tunnel of eyes and bodies. People stepped from doorways, calling offers that didn't sound like sales pitches anymore. They sounded like chants. What do you need, boss? I've got this. I've got that. I've got boys. Fresh boys. A hand grabbed my elbow. I yanked free and pushed forward, breathing through a wall of cracked smoke and urine and sweat. Then a large man stepped into my path, a pistol tucked into his waistband. He didn't ask for money. He just looked at me and said, calm like an office worker, "You, where did you come from just now? And where do you think you're going?" That calmness was worse than shouting. I stammered something about being lost. My eyes darted toward a gap between shacks. I didn't wait. I shoved past him and burst into the main road, half expecting a bullet to hit my back. Nothing came. Just noise, chaos. People moving like this was normal life. I ran until my lungs burned. I found transport. I went home. I showered until my skin was raw. I threw away the clothes I'd worn like they were infected. And in the silence of my room, the question finally caught up with me. What happened to Adam? It's been 6 years. I never saw him again. No messages. No sightings. No closure. The only trace I ever found was a cap. A homeless man was wearing a dolphin's cap, caked in dirt, almost unrecognizable, but I knew it anyway because of the damage on the back strap, the same tear Adam's cap always had. That was the last time his name felt real to me. After that, he became what the city turns people into when it's finished with them. A story. A missing person. A rumor that lives in the mouth of someone brave enough to say La Letra out loud. And if you've never heard of it, if you've never seen it, keep it that way. Because the worst part isn't that it exists. The worst part is that it's been there the whole time, and people walk past it every day, pretending they don't smell a thing. Story 2. I used to be someone. Not in the way people say it when they're trying to sound dramatic. I mean it literally. I had a name that meant something, a face people recognized, a life with weight to it. I stood straight. I walked like I belonged in my own skin. I'm a veteran, for God's sake. I served 4 years in the U.S. Military. Not the desert, the jungle. Wet heat, thick air, green walls of leaves that swallowed sound and men alike. I did what I was told. I carried my share. I watched friends disappear into mud and shadow and never come back out. And now I'm nothing. Another piece of trash on the street. Dirt under someone else's nails. The kind of person people avoid looking at because it makes their day harder to pretend. I still remember the day God turned on me. Not the slow drift, not the quiet neglect. I mean the exact moment my world split in half, and I realized the thing I trusted most didn't care about me the way I cared about it. That day was furious, righteous in the cruelest way, like something holy decided I needed to be broken, physically and mentally, for reasons I would never understand. Before that, I would have sworn God was loving, that he held me like I mattered, like I was special, like I was one of the few he actually noticed in the endless crowd of humanity. After the war, my homecoming is a blur. People think they understand what it's like. Parades, handshakes, strangers calling you a hero, or the opposite, cold stares, bitterness, spit on the sidewalk. I'd heard all the stories, so none of that surprised me. But that's not what I remember. What I remember is him. The day he found me. I don't even know how it happened. One moment I was in my own world, carrying my damage like a heavy pack I couldn't take off. The next moment I felt hands around me. Hands too big, too careful, too warm. I was lifted as if gravity stopped applying to me. Held, cradled, like I wasn't a broken veteran or a man losing his grip on normal life, like I was precious. And when I looked up, when my eyes finally focused through panic and disbelief, I saw the face of a young human staring down at me with pure excitement. A cosmic giant with the features of a boy, smiling like he'd just been given the best gift in existence. He wasn't alone. Two other giants walked beside him, one male and one female, taller than he was, their steps calm and effortless, as if they were strolling through a garden instead of carrying a human into the sky. I should have been terrified. I should have fought. I should have prayed. Instead, his smile melted the fear right out of me. It made me forget that what was happening was impossible. He looked so happy to have me that against every instinct I had, I felt something strange bloom in my chest. Gratitude, excitement even, like I'd been chosen, like I finally mattered again. When we reached his realm, he carried me through halls that didn't make sense. The air felt clean in a way no air on earth ever does. Everything looked too sharp, too bright, too perfect. Not heaven exactly, more like a place built by someone who wanted heaven to look a certain way. He took me to his chambers, and inside I saw others. Men, soldiers, warriors. Not just from my time, not just from my country. I saw faces and uniforms that didn't belong to any modern war. I saw armor that belonged in museums. I saw weapons that belonged in history books. Men from all eras of mankind, gathered together, alive but not alive, present in a way that made my skin prickle. For the first time since I'd returned from war, I felt my chest loosen. I truly believed I had been brought to a paradise made for men like us, a divine afterlife for those who gave themselves to battle, even if they didn't die on the field. My God, because that's what I called him then, placed me among them like he was adding a final piece to something he'd been building. The men greeted me like they understood exactly what I was feeling. Relief, brotherhood, a sense that we'd finally arrived somewhere that made sense. We bonded fast. That's what soldiers do. We all had reasons for fighting. We all had places we came from. We all had scars we didn't talk about, unless the night got quiet enough. Our God visited us every day. He didn't just walk through like a king checking his subjects. He stayed. He slept in the same room. He watched us. He handled us. He gave us voices when we needed them, strength when we faltered, comfort in a way no human hand could ever offer. It wasn't like any religion I'd grown up with. It wasn't church. It wasn't prayer. It was something physical and immediate, like being cared for by something so far above you that you couldn't even comprehend what it saw when it looked at you. And I liked it. I liked the peace. I liked the way my brothers felt close again, like a squad that couldn't be separated by death or time. Some nights, our God would choose a handful of us and allow us to sleep in his own bed. We treated it like an honor, like being selected for something holy. The first time it happened to me, I remember feeling cleansed afterward, like I'd been stripped of something rotten inside me and rebuilt. I woke up the next day with devotion burning in my chest so bright it almost hurt. This is how it was for a long time, back when I still had dignity, back when I still had my real body. But after what felt like a century, time moved strangely there. Our loving God started to change. At first it was small. He visited less. He lingered less. His presence stopped filling the room the way it used to. Then his appearance began to shift. His face, once smooth and young, started to look older. A stubbled mustache appeared on his upper lip. His skin developed craters, tiny pits that made him seem suddenly imperfect, suddenly human. He grew taller. His chambers changed too. He started pinning pictures on the walls. Pictures of other gods. False gods, I thought. Beings he seemed to worship or admire. I didn't understand it. Why would a god need other gods? But I knew better than to question him. Then it reached the point where he stopped acknowledging us entirely. He would come in and act like we weren't there. Like the room was empty. Like his soldiers, his brothers in arms from every era, were nothing but furniture. That's when the Dark Ages began. We grew quiet, resentful, and beneath everything else, there was the sick feeling of being abandoned. Whispers started among us, soft talk in corners, plans that began as jokes and turned into real conversations. A coup, a rebellion, a way to make him notice us again, or punish him for turning his back. Most of the men stopped believing he'd ever loved us. We started to see ourselves the way neglected things see themselves. Playthings, toys, entertainment for a bored cosmic being. It felt hopeless. But hopelessness doesn't stop soldiers from planning. If anything, it makes planning easier. When you have nothing left to lose, the idea of losing everything stops scaring you. We made plans anyway, and I won't lie, I was tired too. I was angry too. I felt the same hunger for justice, for recognition, for something that proved we weren't just decorations. We mistook his silence for weakness. We mistook his neglect for lack of power. And worst of all, we mistook his silence for lack of love. That day proved his love was still there. It just wasn't the kind of love we thought it was. We were spread out across the chamber, men resting in their territories like animals in cages, when the door flew open with a sound like thunder cracking inside a sealed room. What stepped through wasn't our god. It was another god entirely. This one didn't arrive with warmth or excitement. He arrived like a storm. He tore through the chamber with a rage so intense it felt like the air itself was being shredded. He ripped the pictures off the walls. He knocked things off shelves. He smashed our god's possessions to the floor like they were meaningless. And when he spoke, my blood turned cold, because I recognized the voice. We all did. A voice we'd heard echo through the realm countless times, distant and sharp, like the opposite of our god's softness, like the counterweight that balanced his affection. My mind flashed back to the jungle. Not memories exactly, sensations. The way fear tastes metallic, the way your body goes still before chaos hits, the way you can feel violence coming before it arrives. Our god stood in the doorway crying. He wasn't a king. He wasn't powerful. He looked like a child being punished. The new god, his brother, I would learn, ripped sheets from the bed, overturned furniture, destroyed the room like he was erasing it. Then he turned his attention to us, and he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It wasn't human. It was the smile of something enjoying what it was about to do. He walked toward us slowly, and none of us moved. We were soldiers, sure, but we were soldiers in a place where death didn't mean release, where pain didn't end in mercy. We stood frozen, because something deep in us understood that this wasn't a battle. It was a punishment. He reached up and plucked Prince Adam from his spot, like Adam weighed nothing. Adam gripped his sword, refused to let go. Pride, dignity, the last thing you cling to when everything else is being taken. With a simple twitch of his fingers, the evil god tore Adam's arm from his body. The scream that came out of Adam didn't belong in any paradise. It didn't belong in any afterlife. It sounded like something ripped straight from hell. Our god broke then. He rushed forward, desperate, trying to get Adam back. The evil god shoved him down like he was nothing, laughing, laughing at him while Adam screamed. Our God shouted curses in a language I didn't know, but 6 words cut through, clear as daylight. Words I'd heard men spit in rage on earth. I wish you weren't my brother. The evil God shrugged, as if it meant nothing. Then he went back to Adam. He snapped Adam's sword like it was a twig and tossed it aside. And piece by piece, he tore Adam apart. Not quickly, not kindly. Limbs thrown across the chamber like scraps. And Adam's screams. They kept going, even when there shouldn't have been anything left to scream with. It shattered us. It broke something inside the room itself, like the walls remembered every sound and would never forget. Our God sat on the ground, trembling, small, helpless, human in the worst way. And when Adam was finally discarded, the evil God turned to the rest of us. One by one, each brother taken, each body pulled apart, each voice screaming. I watched it happen until my mind went numb, until I felt like I was floating outside myself, forced to witness the destruction of everything that had ever felt safe. Then he came for me. For a moment, a single, stupid moment, I thought my God would finally do something. I saw it in his eyes. His rage flared hotter when the evil God reached for me, like he wanted me spared, like he wanted me protected, but he didn't move. He stayed on the floor, shaking, drowning in his own fear. That's when the last bit of peace in me died. I looked the evil God in the eye, and I roared. A real roar, the kind that comes from the deepest part of a warrior. I screamed until my throat burned, until my voice cracked, until there was nothing left to give, and I accepted my fate. He tore my head off, and I felt it. I couldn't die. We were already dead, so there was no escape in darkness, no relief, no ending. Even without my head, I felt everything as he pulled my arms and legs off, one by one, like he was dismantling a toy. When he finished, he didn't even look at me again. He stepped over my crying God and left, slamming the door behind him. The room filled with the sound of my brothers wailing, begging for death that wouldn't come. Time passed. It felt like months. Maybe it was. Time didn't behave like it should there. Eventually, our God stood up. He began collecting what was left of us. Not gently, not like a caretaker, like trash. He gathered scattered limbs and tossed them into a bin. The wails grew muffled as bodies were stuffed into darkness, discarded like broken objects. I saw my own legs across the chamber, my arms, my torso. Pieces of me spread out like evidence from a crime scene. I hated him then. I hated him for abandoning us, for letting his brother tear through us in his own realm, for watching like a coward while his soldiers were butchered. In the middle of my rage, the chamber door opened again. Our God stepped inside, wiping tears from his eyes. He moved quietly now, carefully. He collected my pieces while I screamed at him, cursed him, begged him to leave me alone. He didn't react. He placed my parts on what looked like a desk, a work table, a duty station. He arranged my limbs like he was putting together a model. Then he left the room again. When he returned, he held a device I didn't recognize. He sat down in front of me and began to solder my limbs back onto my body. The heat was unbearable. It felt like being burned alive from the inside out. Every connection sent pain flooding through me, pure and bright, like fire in my veins. But slowly, I was reassembled. Arms, legs, torso, and finally, my head. When it was done, he leaned back in his chair and admired his work. He stared at me like he was proud, like he was loving, like nothing had happened. But I wasn't the same anymore. My brothers were gone. My faith was gone. My dignity had been torn apart and thrown across the room like spare parts. And he looked at me with that same warm expression he'd had when he first scooped me up into the sky. Like I was special. Like I was his. He left me on that desk. He didn't acknowledge me. Not really. He didn't apologize. He didn't grieve the way a real God should grieve. He didn't even seem ashamed. I wasn't his soldier anymore. I wasn't his brother. I was his decoration. A desk ornament. A broken toy he rebuilt because he couldn't stand to lose it, not because he cared what it had been through. And that's the cruelest part. Not that God turned on me, but that he still looks at me like he loves me, while leaving me here, silent, stitched together, watching the room like a piece of furniture, pretending I don't remember what he let happen. Story 3. For 3 years after what happened with the somnologist, I kept it all to myself. Every night, every new body, every panic-filled moment, where I woke up inside someone else's dead skin and had to endure whatever the end of their day had been. No matter how disgusting or terrifying or heartbreaking it got, I never told anyone. I promised myself I wouldn't. I couldn't handle the idea of dragging another person into it and getting them hurt or killed because of me. But I don't think I hid it as well as I thought. My dad would look at me across the breakfast table like he was watching someone slowly drown. I'd stumble in, pale and exhausted, hands shaking while I tried to hold a spoon like it didn't weigh 50 pounds. He never said the words directly, but I could see them in his face. Let me carry it. My father was that kind of man. If he could have taken the curse and put it on his own shoulders, he would have done it without hesitating. He kept pushing me to see another specialist, another sleep doctor, another somnologist. He said the first death was a freak coincidence, something that had nothing to do with me. I didn't believe him. I couldn't. Not after seeing what I saw and waking up knowing I'd been there when it happened. Not after realizing my sleep didn't just affect me. It reached outward. It touched other people. It created damage. So I refused. Stubbornly. Completely. Instead, I adapted. I did whatever I could to limit the harm. Before bed, I would tie my wrists and ankles to the bedposts with soft cloth, tight enough to stop wild thrashing, but loose enough not to cut off circulation. I'd learned the hard way that even if my mind couldn't move inside the bodies I visited, my real body could still act out my fear. The incident with the hiker proved that. Whatever I was doing in my sleep wasn't harmless. I also started keeping records, a journal, every experience, every detail I could remember. At first, it was just notes. Time, sensations, environment, cause of death if I could figure it out. Then it became patterns, categories, frequency counts. I tried to treat it like a problem I could solve if I just stared at it long enough. Eventually, I started sketching. I didn't plan to. It just happened. Sometimes words weren't enough. Sometimes I needed the shape of a room, the angle of a face, the way light hit something awful. The drawings were always dark, always heavy, but putting them on paper helped me keep them from living entirely inside my head. I built routines too. The first thing I did in every new place, every new body, was search for one beautiful thing, one anchor. It could be anything. A star through a window, the sound of wind in trees, a painted ceiling tile, the color of someone's shirt. One detail I could grip like a railing when everything else started to slide. The second thing I did was slow down. I trained myself not to panic immediately, to let the experience arrive gradually, to take in my surroundings like I was stepping into cold water instead of being thrown into it. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, But the structure saved me more than once, and the whole time I hunted for a pattern that could free me. Some clue, some weakness in the curse. The only rule I could confirm was the same one that had haunted me from the beginning. I always ended up inside the recently dead. People who died earlier that day. Changing my sleep schedule didn't stop it. It just changed when in the timeline I dropped in. Medication didn't help. Staying awake didn't fix it. Skipping sleep only made me collapse harder later. And then the experience came anyway. Like the curse had all the patience in the world. My dad helped in the only ways he could. He started being around more, helping with homework, cooking, fixing little things around the house, sitting with me when my eyes went distant. He never said I'm afraid too, but I think we both understood it. After the somnologist, it was like he didn't want to let me out of his sight for too long. My mom wasn't really there. Not the way a mother should be. Ever since my 13th birthday, she threw herself into her work like she was running from something. She was the breadwinner, and at first I told myself it was normal. Pressure, responsibility, adult stress. But she became a ghost in our house, always arriving late, always leaving early. Even when she was home, she wasn't with us. She'd talk to my dad behind closed doors in hushed voices, and if I walked too close, they'd fall silent. I assumed my condition scared her. I assumed work was how she coped. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. Not even close. Anyway, thank you, seriously, for sticking with me. This is my 4th post, and I didn't expect anyone to keep reading after the first one, let alone care. Especially the people who message me telling me to be careful, telling me they're worried. I appreciate it more than I can explain. Now for what happened next. It happened on my 18th birthday. My dad wanted to celebrate. He took me out to eat, then a movie. Something normal, something that felt like it belonged to a life that wasn't cursed, but I was exhausted. At that point, I'd still been testing how long I could go without sleep. And a few nights earlier, I'd had a particularly intense experience that convinced me I needed to stay awake as long as possible. So by the time we were driving home, I was running on fumes. My whole body felt hollow. My eyes burned. My thoughts were slow and sticky. I tried to stay awake in the passenger seat. I really did. But the warm hum of the car, the darkness outside, my father's steady presence, it all felt safe, and my body took the first chance it could to shut down. The moment I fell asleep, I was no longer in my dad's car. I was in another vehicle. It was night. Tires on asphalt, the low, steady roar of an engine, that familiar motion of a car moving through darkness. And immediately, I knew something was wrong. The body I was in felt wrong, not car crash wrong. I've been in car crash bodies so many times that I know that feeling. Broken bones, angles that shouldn't bend, pressure and dead weight and cold. This wasn't that. This wasn't even human in the way I understood human. The head felt normal. I could feel the shape of a face, eyes, teeth behind lips, the structure of a skull. But the rest felt like ooze, like shapeless meat, like something melted, and the sensation that rose up from it, the closest word I can find, is slugged. That's what it felt like. A slimy mass of flesh, trembling and shifting in a grotesque way I can't fully describe. Not muscles, not limbs, not anything that belonged on a person. Just meat. Worse, I felt cocooned. Something soft and plastic pressed against my face. It wasn't hard like a coffin. It gave a little. It bent. It stuck. It held my skin tight enough that every tiny movement made the plastic cling tighter. There was no air. Not truly, because I didn't need to breathe. But my instincts didn't care about that. My body's panic didn't care that the body I was in was dead. The sensation of suffocation was so real, my mind reacted like it was drowning. I tried to inhale. Of course, I couldn't. And in trying, I drew the smell deeper into my nose. Rot. Sweet, thick rot. It was coming from below the head, from the heap of meat the head was pressed into. The back of the skull was jammed against it, so tightly my face was pinned, restrained by the plastic. I gagged. I panicked. I fought against nothing. For long minutes, I endured the feeling of being suffocated to death. I'd inhabited bodies that drowned before, but even then, it wasn't like this. Water is a weight. It presses. It doesn't cling the way plastic does. It doesn't trap your face in a tight, stale pocket of air and rot. Eventually, somehow, I forced myself to calm down. I repeated it like a prayer. You don't need to breathe. You don't need to breathe. This isn't your body. You aren't dying. And slowly the panic eased, enough that I could listen. The car kept moving. Then it slowed. The body shifted as the vehicle decelerated, and the head rolled slightly, pressing my cheek deeper into the rotten mass beneath. The smell intensified. It was so thick it felt like it had texture. The engine cut off. A car door opened and shut. Footsteps on gravel. Approaching. Then a lock. A trunk. The trunk opened. A thin strip of light filtered through the black plastic around my head, and I could see the silhouette of a man looming above me, distorted through the bag like a shadow seen through dirty water. A hand reached down. He lifted the bag. My face pressed harder into the meat beneath as gravity shifted. And then, as he carried me, I felt something I had never felt before in all my experiences. I felt myself being pulled apart, not physically, not with pain in nerves, something deeper. Like my soul was stretched, like being hooked and dragged in two directions. I silently screamed, pure panicked rage, because it felt like my very existence was being torn. Then the man climbed stairs, one step at a time, and the pulling sensation worsened, like the distance mattered, like elevation mattered. And then, relief. Another person picked up a second bag, and whatever was left of the body was lifted too. The tearing sensation eased, not because it stopped, because the rest of me was moving again. That's when I understood. The body I'd inhabited had been divided, separated, bagged, dumped into pieces. And my head, my point of awareness, was only part of it. Lights passed overhead at regular intervals as they walked, and I watched them blink by through the thin plastic. A hallway, expensive, clean, the kind of house that smells like money and cold air conditioning. The kind of house where you'd never expect something like this. I started counting the ceiling lights just to keep myself from thinking too hard. 1, 2, 3. I got into the teens before they stopped at a closed door. They waited. The two men holding the bags stood there like they'd done this before, like this wasn't even the worst thing they'd carried through a hallway. A knock. The door opened, and the sound that came out hit me like a fist. Groaning. Pain. A calm voice layered over it, speaking with terrifying authority. Through the plastic, I could see part of the room. A woman facing away, being held upright by a huge man. Another man, slicked back hair, neat clothes, the kind of polished look that should belong in an office, held a knife and talked to her like he was negotiating a deal. Occasionally, he ran the blade down her face, like he was underlining his words. He asked about money. Money her husband had stolen. Money she swore she knew nothing about. The groans weren't from the knife. They were from the big man twisting her arms behind her back in ways arms aren't meant to go. Then the slick-haired man got impatient. He told the big man to turn her around, to let her see. The two men carrying the bags lowered them to the floor. And then they tipped them. They poured me out. The head rolled free, slick, heavy, wrong. I felt myself slide, felt the sickening sensation of separating from the meat mound and rolling across a rug. Two piles of flesh hit the carpet with wet slaps and spread like thrown sludge. The woman's scream didn't sound human at first. It was too raw, too sudden, like the soul trying to leave the body through the throat. She dropped to her knees as my head rolled to a stop near a bed. I watched through dead eyes as she sobbed over the shredded remains of her husband, because I knew. I knew whose head I was in now. Her husband, the man they'd fed into a wood chipper. The slick-haired man told her exactly that, almost casually, like he was describing the process at work. Betrayal, wood chipper. And then he promised her the same for her children if she didn't talk. She broke. Of course, she broke. He made sure she broke. The threat wasn't abstract. My ruined body was proof, sitting right there on the carpet, soaking the rug crimson, while the plastic bags dripped blood. She begged for her kids. She swore she didn't know. Then she gave the location, a hiding place. Somewhere in the house. Satisfied, the slick-haired man walked out to check it. The big man stood guard over her, and the woman crawled, still sobbing, still shaking, toward my head. Slowly, she lifted it, held it to her chest, like it was the last piece of him she could hold on to. Her hands brushed sticky hair away from the eyes. Her face hovered close, wet with tears, eyes full of grief and terror and disbelief. And I stared back. I felt everything at once. Revulsion, anger, heartbreak, the sick, burning helplessness of being trapped inside a dead man's head while his wife clutched him and cried into his hair. I'd seen death before. So much death. Accidents, natural causes, suicide, animal attacks. None of it compared to this. This wasn't tragedy. This was cruelty with a plan. Then the two children were brought into the room. They were ushered in by the men who'd carried the bags, like the kids were just another piece of the performance. Their screams joined their mothers. A family collapsing together in a pool of blood. The slick-haired man returned with 2 suitcases. He looked satisfied, like he'd solved the problem. He handed them to the big man, who left. The other men left too. And then the slick-haired man, alone now with the family huddled on the blood-soaked rug, pulled out a handgun. He shot both children. Just like that. No speech, no hesitation. 2 loud cracks, 2 small bodies dropping, and their mother's scream ripping itself into something animal. I screamed too, but only inside myself, inside the cage of my stolen viewpoint. The gun smoked. He pointed it at the mother's head. She looked up at it like she was ready, like she was begging for the mercy of a quick ending. But he didn't shoot. He sneered, and then he hit her with the gun, hard, on the side of the head. She crumpled, unconscious, still breathing. And then my head rolled out of her arms. It tumbled and slid until it bumped under the bed and stopped halfway beneath it. From there, all I could see was the polished black leather of the slick-haired man's shoes. As he walked to the door, spoke briefly to the men outside, and left. Then the men came back in, not with knives, with something else. They splashed a liquid around the room, fast and practiced, and the smell of gasoline pushed its way in, fighting the rot, mixing with it until the air felt poisonous. They splashed the unconscious woman too. They left, closed the door, and I listened as the splashing continued down the hallway, a trail leading away, a plan unfolding. The woman stirred, slowly, confused, her head lifted, and then she looked toward me, toward her husband's head under the bed. For a moment, I swear she knew. Not logically, not the way a person understands facts, but the way grief recognizes presence. Her eyes met mine, and her face twisted with something like apology, like she was sorry she couldn't hold him anymore, sorry she was still alive, sorry for everything. And then fire rushed under the door. A bright, sudden flash. Flames swallowed the room fast, turning the air into heat and screaming light. The woman woke fully just long enough to realize she was on fire. Her screams filled everything. The smell of burning flesh replaced the rot, thicker, sharper, unbearable. I wanted to close my eyes. I couldn't. I couldn't look away. I watched her burn. I watched the fire consume the bed, the rug, the curtains, the bodies, and the sound, God, the sound, cut into me in a way nothing ever had. I thought the flames would hurt me too. I almost wanted them to. Anything to distract me from what I was seeing. But the pain never came. Instead, something else happened. As the fire ate through the piles of flesh, I felt the curse loosening, like restraints slipping, like fabric sliding off skin. I felt myself rising, floating upward, light as breath, lifted by something I didn't understand. And I realized, shaking with sudden hope, that I was becoming free, free of the body, free of the curse, free of the nightly horror. The relief hit so hard it made me feel like crying, even though I didn't have tears in that borrowed head. I rose past the roof, out into the night, and above the expensive house the sky opened wide, scattered with stars like cold glitter. I slowed, hovering, still tethered to the head under the bed, still connected, but barely. The fire was nearly there. The head would burn. The last anchor would be destroyed, and I would be gone. Finally, I stared up, waiting, begging silently for the flames to finish. Then I felt it. Cold hands. Not human hands. Cold, clammy hands that didn't belong in the air. They wrapped around me and yanked. They dragged me downward like a fisherman hauling a line. I looked below and saw why. The sprinklers had kicked on. Water sprayed down in heavy sheets, choking the flames, fighting the fire just long enough to save structure, just long enough to stop the head from burning. No, 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 no. I fought. I pulled. I tore at those freezing hands with everything I had, screaming into the open sky without sound. I was so close, so close. I gave one last desperate tug, ripping at two of the hands gripping me. And suddenly I was flying, not upward, sideways, fast, violently. The stars vanished. The night sky collapsed. And I was back in my dad's car. I was looking through the windshield. The ground was rushing up. And then everything went black. Story 4. I'd been living with my sister Beck as my roommate for about 8 months. And honestly, it had been the easiest living situation I'd ever had. No real drama. No big fights. Just the normal roommate stuff. Little arguments about who ate whose, leftovers, whose turn it was to do the dishes, that kind of harmless tension that blows over in 5 minutes. For the most part, it felt stable, safe. That's why the day she came home looking wrong hit me so hard. When I say drained, I don't mean tired the way a college student is tired. I mean she looked like someone had pulled all the warmth out of her body. Her skin was pale, almost waxy. Her hair was damp like she'd been sweating. She dragged her feet like each step was heavier than it should have been. She didn't even have the energy to complain. At first, I tried to be reasonable. Maybe she'd been up all night studying. Maybe she caught some virus going around campus. Maybe she hadn't eaten enough. Still, it bothered me. Something about her face was blank, like she wasn't fully there. I told her to go lie down. I tried to keep my voice calm, like I wasn't scared, like this was normal. She didn't argue, which was unusual for her. Beck usually had something to say. Even when she felt bad, she'd crack a joke or roll her eyes. That time, she just nodded and walked to her room like she was moving through water. I went straight to the kitchen and made soup. Not instant noodles or a snack. Real soup. Something warm and heavy. The kind of thing you make when you want to believe warmth can fix a problem. While it simmered, I kept thinking about how pale she'd looked. It wasn't just sick. It was like her skin had lost color completely, like the blood had gone somewhere else. When I finally carried the bowl into her room, she was already asleep. Not a light nap either. Her breathing was slow and deep, but the kind of deep that made me nervous, like she'd dropped into it too fast. I set the soup down on her nightstand and told myself she'd wake up soon. Beck never slept long. She'd nap for an hour, maybe two, and then be up again, scrolling on her phone, asking what's for dinner, acting like nothing happened. So I waited. An hour passed, then another, then midnight. I kept checking her door like I was watching a clock. I sat on the couch and tried to distract myself, but my ears stayed tuned toward her room, listening for any sign of movement. Nothing. By the time it was getting close to 2 a.m., my stomach was tight. The soup was cold. My thoughts were louder than the apartment. That's when I promised myself, if she's still like this in the morning, I'm calling a doctor. No debating. No, maybe she just needs rest. If she slept that long and didn't wake up to eat, something wasn't right. In the morning, I called. A house doctor came by not long after, and I tried to stay calm while he went into her room. I sat outside the door, hands clasped, listening to him move around, listening to the small sounds of him checking her pulse, her breathing, asking questions she barely answered. It felt like forever. When he finally stepped out, his face told me everything before he even spoke. He said I needed to call an ambulance. Right away. He said he couldn't help her. Whatever was happening, it was serious. Hospital serious. That was the moment it stopped being, maybe she's sick, and became something else. Something colder. The next few days blurred together. For 3 days, she stayed in that bed, and I stayed beside her, like I was afraid she'd disappear if I looked away. I slept in a chair. I ate when I remembered to eat. I watched her face constantly, waiting for it to change. She barely talked. She barely ate. When she did speak, her voice sounded thin and far away. One detail kept coming back, though. She complained about her left forearm. She kept brushing her hand against it, like something was crawling under her skin. Like there was a bug there, or a sting, or a spot that wouldn't stop hurting. At first, I thought maybe it was an IV bruise, or a nerve thing, or something from sleeping wrong. But it wasn't normal pain. It looked like she was trying to wipe something off her arm that I couldn't see. A week passed, and instead of getting better, she got worse. It happened slowly, then all at once. Her skin got even paler. Not just light. It started to look almost paper white, like the color had been drained from her. She dropped weight so fast it didn't make sense. Her hands felt cold when I held them. Her lips looked dry. Her eyes stayed half-lidded like she couldn't fully wake up. There was a point where I sat at her bedside and realized she didn't feel like Beck anymore. The room felt different too. I don't know how else to explain that. It's like the air had turned heavy, like the corners were darker than they should have been, even with the lights on. She started gasping sometimes, like her body forgot how to breathe properly. I held her hand and tried not to cry in front of her, but it broke me. That sound, someone you love struggling for air, does something to you. It makes you feel helpless in a way you can't explain. Doctors ran tests, more tests, blood work, scans, questions, charts, machines, and still nothing. No clear answer. No explanation that matched what I was seeing with my own eyes. It got to the point where they were talking about life support, about her slipping into a coma, about preparing. Those words don't feel real until they're aimed at someone you grew up with. That's when I called our older brother. I didn't even know what to say, really. Just, you need to come. It's bad. He came the next day, and when he walked in, he stopped like the sight of her hit him physically. He tried to keep it together, but I could see the pain in his face. We hugged, and I told him everything. How she'd come home drained, how she slept forever, how nothing helped, how the doctors couldn't explain it. His daughter, our niece, Candace, was close to Beck too. Candace adored her. Beck had babysat her, done movie nights, sleepovers, all that. So it wasn't just Aunt. Beck was comfort to her, safe to her. That day, Candace came with him. At first, she wasn't in the room. My brother got a phone call and stepped out into the hall for a minute, and I stayed by Beck's bed, alone, holding her hand, watching her chest rise and fall, like it was a struggle. Then I heard a small voice. I turned and saw Candace at the doorway, holding her mom's hand, peeking in like she wasn't sure she should enter. She looked at Beck for a long moment, very still, like she was trying to understand what she was seeing. Then she said, quietly, "What's that?" I swallowed hard and said, "That's Aunt Beck. She's sick." Candace didn't respond the way a kid usually responds. She didn't cry right away. She didn't ask a bunch of questions. Her face tightened, and then she pointed straight toward the window, and her voice turned sharp. Let go of her. It wasn't a kid's playful anger. It was serious, almost furious. I stared at her, confused, and then I looked where she was pointing. There was nothing. Just the window, curtains, pale light. Candace pointed harder, like she was aiming at something specific. "Let my aunt go." "Now," she said. "Leave. Let her go, and don't come back." My skin went cold. I looked at Candace again. She wasn't acting. She wasn't joking. She wasn't performing for attention. She was looking at something I couldn't see with absolute certainty. I forced myself to speak, but my voice came out tight. "Sweetie, who are you talking to?" Candace didn't answer me. She walked right up to the bed, eyes locked on empty air, like there was someone standing between her and the window. She took Beck's hand in both of hers. She leaned her head down onto the mattress like she was grounding herself, like she was bracing for something. And she said again, softer but still firm, "Don't come back." I stepped back until my shoulders hit the wall. My heart was hammering. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just watched, because something in me understood. Whatever this was, I didn't want to interrupt it. A minute later, my brother came back into the room. Of course he had missed it. He saw Candace holding Beck's hand and thought it was just a sweet moment. He didn't see what I saw, but I did. and I didn't forget it. Here's the part that still messes with me. After that day, Beck started improving. Not instantly, not like a miracle movie scene, but the change was real. She woke up more. She ate. She started getting color back in her cheeks. Slowly, like her body was remembering how to be alive. The coldness faded. Her breathing got steadier. Her strength came back in pieces. Small steps at first. Sitting up, drinking water, asking for food, talking without sounding like she was speaking from underwater. The doctors were shocked. They still couldn't explain what happened. And honestly, that made it worse in a way, because it meant there was no box to put it in, no neat label. But I had my own explanation now, even if it didn't sound sane out loud. Later, when Beck was well enough to talk about it, she told me something that made my stomach drop. She said while she was sleeping, she wasn't just unconscious. She was dreaming. And in the dream, she kept seeing a man. A black, skinny, cold-looking man. Like a shape made out of emptiness. She said he looked wrong in a way she couldn't describe. Like he bent the light around him. Like the room couldn't decide where his edges were. And in the dream, he was always holding her left forearm. Always. She said she could feel it, even in the dream. That grip on her arm, like something latched onto her there. And she said she could feel him draining her, pulling the life out of her slowly, like drinking through a straw. He followed her. He didn't leave her side. When she said that, I remembered how she kept rubbing her forearm, like something was on it. And I remembered Candace pointing and shouting at the window, "Let go of her." That's when it all clicked in my mind in the most terrifying way. Candace wasn't talking to the air. She was talking to him. Candace had always been the kind of kid who took faith seriously. Bible stories, prayers, doing things by the book. I used to think it was just cute, like a phase, like something she'd grow out of. Now I don't know what to think, because it felt like she saw something none of us could. And somehow, whether it was faith or instinct, or something older and stranger, she pushed it away. She didn't scream for help. She didn't cry. She commanded it like she knew it had rules. Leave. Don't come back. And Beck got better after. I don't care how irrational that sounds. I watched it happen. I watched my sister fading like a candle. And then I watched the flame return after a little girl stood in that room and spoke to nothing like it was something. That experience changed the way I look at the world. It made me wonder how many things are around us that we never notice. How many forces you can't see until they decide they want you to. And I'll be honest, part of me wants to keep Candace close, not because I want to use her like some kind of shield, but because being near her makes me feel like the world has at least one person in it who can see the dark before it touches you. And after what happened to Beck, I don't think I'll ever feel completely safe again. Story 5. Larry says he's had sleep paralysis since he was a teenager, but I didn't really understand what that meant until he started telling people what he saw. He didn't say shadow man. He didn't say demon. He didn't say monster. He said me. And he said, "Cloudy heart." The first time I heard it, I laughed out of pure reflex because it sounded so ridiculous, like the kind of thing you'd say as a joke to scare someone at a sleepover. But Larry didn't laugh back. He kept rubbing his palms together like he was trying to wipe something off his skin, and he wouldn't look at the corners of the room. He explained it like this: when the paralysis hits, his eyes open, but his body doesn't move. He can breathe, but it feels wrong, like the air is too thick. The room looks the same, but also not the same. The shadows feel heavier, and the silence has this pressure to it, like someone is standing close, even if you're alone. And every time it happens, we are there. Cloudy Heart appears first. She sits on his chest like she owns the space between his ribs. Not quite a person, not quite a thing. More like a shape that decided to pretend it had a body. Larry said she looks soft from a distance, but when you focus on her too long, she stops looking soft and starts looking like weather. A storm cloud pressed into the outline of a human. He described her like she was made of bruised sky. I appear in the dark corner. That's Larry's detail, not mine. The dark corner. The same corner. Every time, even if he sleeps in a different room. Even if he turns on a lamp before bed. Even if he sleeps with the TV running. I'm always in the corner where the room looks deepest, where the shadows collect and refuse to thin out. He said, I don't move much. I don't need to. I'm just there, watching, like I'm waiting for something to happen, like I'm the one who caused it, even when I didn't. That's the part nobody seems to understand. People hear sleep paralysis, and they assume it's like a dream, like a private horror movie inside someone's head. But Larry doesn't talk about it like a dream. He talks about it like a repeated event, a routine, something that happens to him, not something he creates. And the worst part is, as far as I can tell, he's right, because I don't choose to be there. I don't like being there. And Cloudy Heart doesn't either, not in the way people assume. She doesn't show up smiling. She doesn't show up hungry. She shows up like something compelled, like a magnet pulled her in from somewhere else, like a rule drags her across a line. Neither of us has any control over it. It's awkward enough that Larry sees us during paralysis. It becomes something else entirely when he sees us while we're all awake. It started small. We'd be out in public, a coffee shop, a bus stop, a hallway between classes. Larry would be in the background, talking to somebody, and then he'd go quiet. His eyes would lock on me like he'd just watched the room's temperature drop 10 degrees. At first I thought maybe he recognized me from somewhere normal, like we'd met once and I'd forgotten. But then I noticed the way his face tightened, like he was fighting a reaction, like he was trying to keep himself from backing away. Then I saw Cloudy Heart in the same spaces and saw the same reaction. He didn't have to say it out loud. I could read it in the way his shoulders rose, the way his breathing became shallow, the way he stared at her chest, then at her hands, then at her eyes, like he was checking whether she looked real today. One time, in a grocery store, I walked past him, and he whispered, "No," under his breath, like he was talking to a memory that had followed him into the produce aisle. Another time, in a parking lot, Cloudy Heart crossed by him without looking at him, and Larry stopped dead, like someone had slapped him. He looked like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. I wanted to say something too. But what do you even say? Hey, sorry I'm the figure your brain puts in the corner when you're trapped in your own body. Hey, sorry that every time you can't move, you see us like we're the reason you can't. Hey, nice to meet you again. There's a humiliation to it that's hard to explain. It's not like being accused of something you did. It's like being accused of something you didn't even know you were doing. Except the accusation comes from someone who is genuinely terrified and isn't trying to be cruel. You can't defend yourself against someone's fear. It doesn't work. And because neither of us has control over it, there's nothing we can promise. We can't say, it won't happen again. We can't say, we'll stop. We can't say, we'll fix it. We're like characters from someone else's nightmare who got forced into the daytime too. At some point, Larry must have decided he couldn't keep living like that. Because one evening, he sent a message that made my stomach twist the second I read it. He invited us over. Not in a joking way. Not in a, let's talk about your weird sleep thing way, with laughter attached. He invited us over like someone inviting a problem into the light, so it can be seen clearly. I remember the feeling of standing outside his place. The normalness of the world made it worse. Porch light. Welcome mat. A neighbor's dog barking somewhere down the street. Everything about it screamed ordinary, and yet it felt like stepping toward a cliff. Cloudy Heart stood beside me. She looked more human in the evening light, like she'd borrowed a body from somewhere and was trying to make it pass. She kept her hands folded and her face calm, but I could feel that tightness around her, the way the air seemed slightly heavier near her shoulders. Like a storm, practicing stillness, we knocked. Larry opened the door with the look of a man who'd been awake for too long. He wasn't shaking exactly, but there was a stiffness in him, like his body was waiting for the paralysis to happen even while he stood upright. He looked at me, looked at Cloudy Heart, swallowed. Then he stepped back and let us in. The inside of his house was warm. Too warm. The kind of warmth people create when they're trying to fight off a feeling that won't leave. The lights were all on. Not just the living room light, but the hallway light, the kitchen light, even a lamp in the corner that didn't need to be on. He'd cooked. That was what hit me hardest. The fact that he'd made food like this was a normal dinner guest situation. Like the three of us were friends. Like the last thing he'd ever seen wasn't Cloudy Heart crushing his breath, and me staring from the corner while he fought not to suffocate on fear. He set plates out. Real plates. Not paper. We sat at the table, and the air was full of unspoken things. It wasn't just tension. It was something heavier. Like we were all waiting for a rule to reveal itself. Larry tried to start normal conversation. Ask how we'd been. Ask what we'd been up to. But every sentence sounded like it got caught in his throat halfway out. His eyes kept flicking toward corners, toward shadows. Even in his own home, even with all the lights on, he looked like he didn't trust the dark. We ate in silence for a few minutes. The clink of forks sounded too loud. The chewing sounded disrespectful, like the room didn't want us to act human. Then Larry finally spoke like he'd reached the edge of whatever politeness he'd been forcing. "I thought I was doom-scrolling the other day," he said. Cloudy Heart tilted her head slightly, like she was listening for the part that mattered. I watched Larry's hands. They were steady, but his fingers kept pressing into the wood of the table, like he needed to feel something solid. Larry stared down at his plate and continued. "I thought I was doom-scrolling by seeing clips of horrible stuff. You know, people getting hurt, animals getting hurt, war, accidents, things you shouldn't watch, but you watch anyway because your brain is broken and the world is on fire." He looked up at us then, and his eyes were bright in a way that made me uncomfortable, like he'd been crying earlier, or like he hadn't blinked enough in days. Then I realized I wasn't doom-scrolling, he said. I was having an epiphany. Cloudy Heart's mouth tightened. She didn't like that word. Epiphany. Like it gave something ugly a halo. Larry kept going anyway. It wasn't entertainment, he said. It was like I was seeing it all. Like I was suddenly aware of all the bad stuff happening at once. Like I could feel it. Like it was happening in the same room as me. Every horrible thing people do to each other. Every cruel thing. Every pointless thing. He laughed once, but there was no humor in it. It sounded like someone knocking on wood in a house where they'd heard a noise upstairs. We went back to eating for a moment, because none of us knew what to do with what he'd said. It wasn't a confession. Not yet. But it felt like the ramp before a drop. Then Larry set his fork down carefully and said, "I did something." Cloudy Heart's eyes sharpened. What you do has a reason, she said, calmly but firmly. Everything has a reason. Nobody is allowed to do things for no reason. Larry stared at her for a long second, like he was trying to decide whether to argue or surrender. Then he said, "That's the thing." He breathed in through his nose slowly, like he could still feel the weight of paralysis on his lungs, even though he was fully awake. "As I thought I was doom-scrolling evil stuff," he said. "It was actually that I was having an epiphany of evil stuff and seeing it all." The way he repeated himself made my skin crawl. It sounded rehearsed, like he'd been practicing the wording to make it feel less insane. Cloudy Heart pushed her chair back slightly, not standing, just shifting away like her body was reacting before her mind could decide. I felt the same urge, to leave, to get out of his house, out of his light, out of whatever conversation this was turning into. I started to move, and Cloudy Heart did too. That's when Larry's voice snapped, not screaming, but sharp enough to cut. "You two appear in my room whenever I have sleep paralysis," he said. "You owe me," because he sounded sure, like he'd decided we were responsible for something we had no control over, and he didn't care whether that was fair. It was the first time I saw something in him that looked like accusation rather than fear. And for a moment, in that brightly lit kitchen, I understood why his sleep paralysis versions of us did what they did. Not because we wanted to, because something in him pulled it out, because something in him needed it to happen, even if it made no sense. We stayed. Neither of us sat back down fully, but we didn't leave either. It was like an invisible line had been drawn across the doorway, and we couldn't cross it until he finished speaking. Larry looked at us like he'd won, like he'd forced the nightmare to play by his rules for once. Then he said it, not with drama, not with tears, just with this flat, sick calm like he was reading a weather report. "I swapped them," he said. I frowned, not understanding. He continued, voice steady. "I took organs from a cow," he said, "and I took organs from a person, and I put them where they didn't belong. I switched them." The room went silent in a way that felt physical, like even the house stopped breathing. Cloudy Heart's face didn't change much, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Disgust, yes, but also something like betrayal, like Larry had broken a rule she believed the universe enforced. I felt my stomach turn, but I refused to give him the reaction he seemed to want. I didn't ask how. I didn't ask when. I didn't ask where. I didn't want details. The idea itself was enough to make my skin feel wrong. Larry leaned forward slightly, eyes wide now, almost excited. "I did it for no reason," he said. Cloudy Heart's voice came out low, like thunder held back. "That's not possible," she said. "You don't do things like that for no reason." Larry smiled, and that smile didn't belong on a human face. "That's what you think," he said. He stared at us like he was waiting for us to admit something, like he believed we were judges, and he'd just placed evidence on the table. I didn't know what to say. There are some things language doesn't know how to hold. If you try to wrap words around them, the words become stupid. They become childish. They become too small. So I said the simplest truth I had. "That's sick," I told him. Larry shrugged like it didn't matter. "You don't get it," he said. "I was seeing it all. I was seeing what people do, what happens every day, what gets hidden, what gets cleaned up, what gets forgotten. I was seeing it like it was in my head." He tapped his temple with one finger. "And I thought," he continued, "if the world can do horrible things for no reason, then so can I." Cloudy Heart stood then, fully. Her chair scraped the floor, loud and harsh. "You're wrong," she said. The world doesn't do it for no reason. People do it because something is broken in them. Larry's eyes flicked to her, amused. Yeah, he said. Then what's broken in you too? That question hung there, poisonous, because we didn't have an answer. We weren't the ones who chose to appear in his room during paralysis. We weren't the ones who decided Cloudy Heart would sit on his chest while I stood in the corner. We weren't the ones who decided we would do things to him when he couldn't move. It just happened. And yet, hearing Larry say it out loud, hearing him claim we owed him, made me realize how it looked from his side. He'd been trapped in his own body, while we appeared like the faces of his fear, and now he'd invited us into his home, like he was trying to trap us instead. That night ended without a clean conclusion. We left, eventually, because even Larry couldn't hold the moment forever. He sat back down, stared at his untouched food, and went quiet, like his energy had burned out. But as I stepped outside into the cool air, I had the creeping feeling that the real story hadn't happened yet, that dinner was just a doorway, that Larry hadn't told us this because he wanted forgiveness. He told us because he wanted us to carry it, because he wanted us to take it with us into the place where he couldn't follow, except when he was asleep. A few nights later, Larry had sleep paralysis again. I didn't know it was happening until it happened, because that's the other truth. We don't get a warning. We don't get to prepare. 1 second we're wherever we are, and the next second we're there, inside that dim, heavy room, under that strange pressure, in that silence that feels like a held breath. Cloudy Heart appeared on his chest like always, sinking into him like the air itself had decided to become weight. I appeared in the corner like always, where the shadows gathered even though the moonlight should have softened them. Larry's eyes were open. He couldn't move, but there was something different in his face this time. Not just fear, expectation, like he'd been waiting to see if the universe would punish him. Cloudy Heart's shape shifted slightly, like she was resisting her own role, like she was trying to stay still, like she was trying not to do what she always did. And I felt it too, this pull, this compulsion, like the room itself had rules and we were trapped inside them, like a script pressing against our minds. Then the air in the room changed. It wasn't just heavier, it became tight, like someone had cinched the space closed. Larry's eyes darted toward the foot of the bed, and for the first time, I saw what he was seeing. There was someone else in the room, a new shape, not in the corner, not on his chest. Closer, too close. It stood near the bed like it had stepped out of a place that didn't belong inside a house. It didn't look like a shadow man. It didn't look like a demon. It looked like a person who had been put back together wrong. The edges of it didn't sit right in the light. The posture was human, but the stillness wasn't, like it was holding itself together through sheer anger. Larry's eyes filled with a different kind of terror then, something sharper than fear, something that tasted like guilt. Cloudy Heart turned her head, slow. I stepped out of the corner without meaning to, and the new presence lifted its face just enough for me to see what was wrong. Not gore, not blood, wrongness, like parts of it didn't match, like the life inside it didn't belong to the body holding it, like something had been swapped where it never should have been. Larry tried to scream, but sleep paralysis doesn't let you scream. It lets you feel the scream trapped in your chest until you think your ribs will crack. The new figure took one slow step forward, and in that moment, I understood something cold and awful. Larry hadn't told us the truth at dinner because he wanted someone to know. He told us because he wanted to see what would happen. He wanted to see if the thing he did for no reason would follow him the way we followed him. He wanted a new face in the room, a new punishment, a new proof that what he did mattered. The figure moved again, and Larry's eyes squeezed shut, like he thought if he couldn't see it, it couldn't exist. Cloudy Heart's wake pressed harder on his chest, not out of cruelty, but out of panic, like she was trying to pin him to the bed so he couldn't be taken. And I, stuck between the corner and the doorway, stuck between guilt and disgust, realized I didn't want to be part of this anymore. Not his paralysis, not his debt, not his attempt to make horror into something he could control. But the room didn't care what I wanted. That's the most terrifying part of it. Larry's sleep paralysis isn't just a nightmare. It's a place. And once you're in it, you don't get to decide what role you play. The new figure stood at the side of the bed, silent, breathing in a way that didn't sound like breathing. It leaned down slightly, like it was listening to Larry's heart, like it was remembering the body it used to have, like it was trying to find what was missing inside itself. Larry's eyes were wide open again, tears slipping out of the corners, because that was the only movement he could make. Cloudy Heart's voice didn't come out as words, but I felt her meaning anyway, like a warning pressed into the air. This isn't ours anymore. This is his. And the figure, this new visitor, shifted its attention away from Larry and toward the corner where I'd always been, toward me. For the first time, I felt what Larry must feel every time he sees us. That helpless, locked-in place feeling. That certainty that something is looking at you and deciding what you are. The figure stared. And even though it didn't speak, I understood exactly what it was. Not a demon. Not a ghost. Not an animal. A consequence. Larry's eyes flicked between me and it, like he was begging for me to do something, like he believed I was the menacing one, the dangerous one, the one with power in this room. But I didn't have power. I never did. I was just a face his fear used. And now, fear had a new face. The figure leaned closer to the bed, and the room filled with that same tight pressure again, like the air was being squeezed. Larry tried to move. Couldn't. Cloudy Heart tried to shift, like she could get off him, like she could break the pattern. She couldn't. And I realized, in a quiet, sinking way, that Larry's invitation to dinner wasn't the start of him taking control. It was the start of him letting something else in. Because whatever he did, whatever he thought was for no reason, created a reason all its own. And now it had found him. Larry's eyes rolled toward the doorway like he wanted to run, like he wanted to wake up, like he wanted to rewind time back before he ever believed he could do something like that and call it meaningless. But sleep paralysis doesn't rewind. It only repeats. The new figure stayed, planted beside the bed, as if it had always belonged there, as if it had been waiting in the dark spaces of Larry's mind, or in the dark spaces of the world. For the moment, he made the wrong kind of choice. And all I could think, standing in that corner that no longer felt like mine, was this. Larry thought he owed a debt, but he picked the wrong collectors. Because if you invite horror into your home to prove a point, it doesn't leave when you're finished talking. It stays. And it learns your address. Story 6. Blanca arrived in the city from a small town to study at the Academy of Fine Arts. She'd passed the entrance exams easily, like she was meant to be there. Her parents had always known she was gifted. When she was little, she'd wake up and start drawing before she even ate breakfast. Quick sketches, funny faces, little cartoons of her mom and dad. And no matter what kind of day they were having, rain, bad news, stress, they would laugh when they saw what she made. That laughter was the most normal thing in her life. It was home. On her first day in the rented room, She unpacked slowly and carefully, like she was handling something fragile. The building was old, the kind with thick walls and quiet hallways. The air smelled faintly of dust and cold stone. She placed a family photo on the small table beside her bed and stood there for a second, looking at their faces. Then her eyes drifted to the window. The view wasn't a street or a park. It was a cemetery. It was surprisingly beautiful in a sad way. An avenue of trees casting long shadows, old monuments, dark crypts stained by weather, and gravestones in neat lines like teeth. A place that didn't feel like part of present day at all. More like a memory that never fully faded. For a moment, a thought hit her so sharply it almost hurt. One day, her parents would die. One day, she would have to stand somewhere like this, staring at stone, while trying not to fall apart. Her chest tightened. She forced herself to breathe. She shook her head like she could physically push the thought away. Then she did what she always did when she felt overwhelmed. She opened her sketchbook. Days passed. The routine of the academy took over. Classes, studios, critiques, late nights, coffee, charcoal dust on her hands. Autumn arrived properly. Leaves fell in a dry whisper, like the city was shedding something. One afternoon, while she was working near the window, she saw movement outside, a funeral procession. It wasn't modern. That was the first strange thing. It looked like something from an old painting. Everyone wore black, but not modern black. More formal, more old-fashioned. Horses pulled a platform slowly down the cemetery avenue. On it sat a coffin decorated with flowers and ribbons. Rich, but tasteful. Blanca leaned closer, confused but curious. They must be filming something. She thought, a period movie. That's the only explanation. But then she noticed another detail that made her stomach drop slightly. The view through the glass looked wrong. Not distorted exactly, just subtly washed out, like the whole scene had been drained of color. Like the world outside had become a shade paler than reality. Blanca blinked. She looked away from that window and glanced at the other one. Normal colors, normal light, normal autumn. Then she looked back, and she froze. A woman dressed in black was walking beside the coffin. She stopped, slowly turned her head, and looked straight at Blanca's window, not in the general direction. At her, Blanca flinched so hard her shoulder hit the wall. She backed away instinctively, heart thudding, when she dared to step forward again. The cemetery outside was empty. No horses, no mourners, no coffin. Just quiet trees and stone. Blanca stood there with her mouth slightly open. She could hear her own breathing. I didn't imagine it, she whispered. I definitely saw it. Her first instinct was to grab her phone and take a photo, but the moment was already gone. All she could do was stand there with the feeling that she'd just watched a scene through a crack in time. She sat at her desk with shaky hands and opened her sketchbook. If she couldn't photograph it, she could do what she had always done. Draw it. She tried to remember the woman's posture, the angle of her head, that sharp, unnatural stillness when she turned. Blanca sketched until her fingers stopped trembling. By the time she finished, there was a black silhouette on the page, half turned, dull and heavy, like it didn't want to be trapped on paper. That weekend, she slept in. When she woke, her hair was messy and her eyes were blurred with sleep. She yawned and walked to the window without thinking, and immediately wished she hadn't. In the distance, among the graves, a group of thin, exhausted people were digging a large pit. Their clothes were wrong too, unfashionable, worn, like they belonged to another time. Their bodies moved with that slow, hopeless rhythm people have when they've stopped believing anything will change. Standing over them were armed men, red berets, blue shirts, tall boots. They smoked as they watched. They laughed. They shouted down like they were at a show. Some of them spat, and the spit landed on the workers like a final insult. Blanca's skin turned cold. Again, she thought, this has to be a film. It has to be. But there were no cameras, no crew, no modern cars, no signs of anything staged. Everything looked real, and worse, it felt real. Not like watching a screen, but like being close enough that the air carried the tension. Blanca was a committed vegetarian, not the trendy kind. The serious kind, like her parents, who believed cruelty spreads if you ignore it. She hated violence. Even seeing it on the news made her sick, so what she saw next hit her like a physical blow. A covered old truck arrived. More people inside, equally weak, equally silent. The soldiers dragged them out, shoving and striking them, forcing them toward the pit. The workers didn't stop digging. They couldn't. Someone shouted, loud and proud, "Arriba España!" And then the soldiers opened fire. Not warning shots. Not into the air. Point blank. They shot unarmed people like it was routine, like it was practice, like it meant nothing. Blanca screamed, a raw, high sound she couldn't control. The moment the sound left her throat, several soldiers snapped their heads toward her window, and then they ran, straight toward her building. Blanca's blood turned to ice. She slammed the window shut so hard the glass rattled in its frame. She stumbled back into the room, shaking, pressing her hands against her mouth like she could stop her own breathing. Her mind raced so fast it felt like it was cracking. This can't be happening. This can't be real. This can't be. She turned, desperate, reaching for it, and stopped. A face was pressed against the outside of the window. A soldier. Close enough that she could see dust on his skin, the blur of his breath on the glass, the dead heaviness in his eyes. Blanca couldn't move. The soldier's mouth twisted like he was making silent words. His expression shifted in a slow, ugly way, like he was grimacing at a smell. His eyes wandered around the room, unfocused, and never landed on her. It went on too long, long enough, that Blanca's knees started to ache from standing rigid. And then she realized something that made the fear change shape. "He can't see me," she whispered. Her eyes darted to the neighboring window, the one where the colors were normal. The haze was there too, but lighter, like a faint fog instead of a thick film. A moment later, the face disappeared. Blanca collapsed onto the floor like her bones had turned to water. She sat there for a long time, staring at nothing, trying to convince herself she wasn't losing her mind. When she finally could move again, she did the only thing she knew how to do. She drew. At the academy, when she showed her sketches, her teacher went quiet. He studied the pages longer than usual, like he was weighing something. Then he sighed. "You're very skilled," he said softly. "But why choose this theme? This is the terrible past of Spain, a wound that never fully heals." Blanca swallowed. She lied. She said she'd been reading about Franco, about the Phalangists, about what they did, and it affected her deeply. That the drawings were her way of processing history. Her teacher nodded slowly, like he believed her, or like he didn't, but chose to accept the explanation because the alternative was too strange. After that, Blanca started watching the cemetery more carefully. Not every day, not even every week. But sometimes, the window would become that pale screen again, and something would play on it like a projector controlled by a hand she couldn't see. The next funeral procession she saw looked modern. A black hearse moving slowly down the avenue. Mourners behind it in neat black coats. An orchestra playing Chopin's funeral march. The music of final goodbyes. Blanca felt relief. Finally, she thought. Something normal. She took out her phone quickly and aimed the camera. The phone screen showed the normal cemetery. Empty, quiet, no hearse, no people. But the music was still there, floating through her room like it didn't care about cameras. Then the music stopped, and the entire procession, every mourner, every musician, halted at the same time and turned toward Blanca's window. Blanca dropped down instantly, crouching beneath the sill, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might trigger an alarm. For a long minute she didn't move at all. She kept her hand pressed against the wall, trembling, like the building itself could feel her fear. When she finally dared to breathe properly, she stayed sitting on the floor under the window and opened her sketchbook again. A thought formed slowly, not like panic, but like a rule clicking into place. Don't engage. They sense attention. If she stared too hard, if she reacted too strongly, if she tried to capture them, they noticed. So she trained herself to observe like an artist, and not like prey. Cold, controlled, detached. It felt horrible to do that, like she was becoming less human just to survive, but it worked. She began to draw them without being noticed. The silhouettes, the uniforms, the carts, the shapes of bodies piled like sacks during plague times, orderlies with grappling hooks, horse-drawn wagons rolling through fog. The teacher kept praising her work. He called it brave, unusual, powerful. He didn't know he was praising something she wasn't creating at all, something she was witnessing. She started asking questions quietly, carefully. The landlady told her that an elderly man had lived in that room for a very long time, and then suddenly moved out one day, packed and gone. No drama, no explanation. Blanca dug deeper. She learned the cemetery had been closed since the early 1990s. Investigations had uncovered mass graves there, victims of the Franco era, and beyond that, older burials too, from a cholera epidemic. Layers of death, stacked under the same soil. Everything she'd seen through the pale window suddenly made a sick kind of sense. Not supernatural in a movie way, more like trauma that refused to stay buried. As the end of the academic year approached, Blanca noticed another change. She began waking in the middle of the night. At first, she thought it was stress. Exams, long days, too much coffee. But then she heard it again, a soft tapping from outside the window. Tap, tap, tap. Not random, not wind, not branches. It sounded like something knocking, searching, testing the glass like it was looking for a weak spot. Blanca lay in bed with her eyes open, refusing to look up. She kept telling herself, don't look, don't react, don't acknowledge. But deep down, she already knew the truth. They had sensed her, despite all her careful distance, despite the rules she'd made. Maybe it wasn't her gaze they felt. Maybe it was her presence, her warmth, her living breath in a room that had become their screen. It's a good thing I keep the window closed, she thought, trying to comfort herself. After the soldier's face at the glass, she hadn't opened it once. She hadn't even dared to lean close again. In the morning, with daylight filling the room, she tried to think logically, and the thought she landed on made her feel sick. What if the drawings were feeding them? What if every sketch she made, every line capturing their faces, their uniforms, their dead rituals, was giving them shape, giving them strength, like she was building them a bridge back into the living world? What if they were looking for the source, not the cemetery, not the past? Her, that day, Blanca made a final decision. No more processing, no more art therapy, no more acting like she could control it just because she could draw it. She gathered every sketch she'd made of the cemetery scenes, every page, every study, every charcoal smear that had felt like proof. She took them to the Academy archive and handed them over like she was handing over a cursed object. It felt wrong leaving them there, but it also felt necessary, like she needed the drawings far away from her, locked in a place where attention was diluted by thousands of other works. Then she told the landlady she wouldn't renew the lease next year. She said she'd found something more modern, brighter, better for studying. The landlady didn't argue. She just nodded, like she'd heard that before. When Blanca left the city and returned to her parents, she tried to breathe again. She tried to sleep without listening for tapping. She tried to draw normal things, faces, hands, bowls of fruit, without seeing uniforms in the shadows. She didn't tell her parents the full truth. Not at first. How could she? She only carried the experience quietly, like a scar science couldn't explain. And when a new tenant moved into that same room, into that old building with the cemetery view, he arrived to find something strange. A fresh renovation, new paint, cleaned walls, a brighter space, but still 2 windows. And one of them, when the light was right, still looked slightly paler than the other, like a screen, waiting for the next person who couldn't resist looking, like death itself had found a perfect place to replay old stories. Until someone watched too closely, and the past finally knocked back. Story 7. We were just kids back then. The kind who still believed the world was big enough to hide inside, if you stayed close to the people who understood you. Every afternoon after school, we played basketball in the cracked alley behind our apartment complex. The concrete was split and uneven, weeds pushing through the gaps like they were trying to escape. The hoop was bent, the net mostly gone, but it didn't matter. That alley was ours. There was me, my older brother Ray, Jasmine, and Joel. 4 of us, always together. If one of us wasn't there, the game felt wrong, like a song missing a beat. We were best friends in the truest way. Not the kind where you just sat together in class, but the kind where you knew each other's secrets, fears, and stupid dreams. We talked about comics, costumes, conventions we wanted to go to one day. We planned cosplays we would never afford. Everyone at school called us losers, weirdos, nerds. They laughed when Ray showed up with a handmade cape, or when Joel wore pins on his backpack. But together, none of that mattered. If being cool meant being cruel, judgmental and empty like most of the kids at school, then we were proud to stay weird. In a cold world, finding people who liked you exactly as you were felt like winning the lottery. The city had already put a curfew in place. Too many kids had gone missing that year. Too many posters taped to light poles, faces smiling back from paper like they were still alive somewhere. Parents whispered on balconies. Sirens passed more often at night. But as long as we stayed in the alley, where parents could see us from windows and balconies, no one yelled. No one chased us inside. It felt safe enough. And always, watching from above, there was her, the woman in apartment 3B. She never came outside. Not once. Not in all the time we played there. I never saw her taking out trash or checking the mail. I never saw her talk to anyone. Her apartment looked like a hoarder's cave from what little we could see through the window. If you squinted, you could make out piles of clutter stacked behind her, like a crooked wall of junk. Most days, she just watched. hidden behind those faded floral curtains, standing completely still. You wouldn't notice her right away. At first, the window looked empty. But if your eyes adjusted, if you stared long enough, you would see the narrow gap in the fabric. And inside that gap, the pale sliver of her face. "She's probably just lonely," Jasmine said once, trying to be kind. "She's a witch," Ray replied. "I swear I heard her arguing with her fridge. But every time I turned to take a shot and caught her staring down at us, my stomach dropped, like I had missed a step on the stairs. There was something about her eyes. They didn't blink much. They didn't wander. They just stayed fixed, like she wasn't watching kids play basketball, but studying animals in a cage. Everything changed on a Thursday. I came home late, just a few minutes before curfew. My backpack bounced against my side as I jogged, heart racing. Great. I really hoped there wasn't a patrol car nearby. I was already trying to think of an excuse, something about a group project, or a teacher keeping us late. I rounded the corner to our building and froze. Flashing lights painted the walls red and blue. 2 police cruisers sat in front of the complex. My heart sank. I slowed down, trying to look invisible, ready for someone to shout at me. But no one even glanced my way. That's when I noticed the officers gathered around the back of an unmarked car. And then I saw her, the woman from apartment 3B. She was handcuffed, being pushed into the back of a cruiser. Her clothes were plain and wrinkled, hanging off her thin frame. Her hair was messy, gray strands clinging to her face. She didn't struggle. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. She sat completely still, like she was already somewhere else. Her eyes weren't on the officers. They weren't on the ground. She stared straight ahead until she saw me. Her head moved slowly, unnaturally slow. Our eyes locked. Her face didn't change at all. No fear, no confusion, no shame. Just that flat, empty stare. The kind of look that makes you feel like someone is counting every detail of your face, memorizing it. I gasped before I could stop myself. It felt like her gaze froze me in place, like my body forgot how to move. Her eyes widened slightly, just a little. But she never looked away, even when the car door slammed shut, even when the cruiser started rolling forward. I backed away slowly, forcing my legs to work again. I turned and hurried inside, my hands shaking. The cruiser rolled past a moment later, lights flashing, and she disappeared around the corner. I closed the apartment door behind me and screamed when I felt a shadow near me. It was Ray. He pointed at the clock on the wall. "Dude, where have you been?" "You were almost too late," he scolded. "Sorry," I stammered. "It's just the weird lady. I saw her getting arrested." Ray's expression changed immediately. He moved toward the door and locked it, checking the chain twice. The next day, her stare was still burned into my mind. I couldn't shake it. Every time I blinked, I saw her eyes. Ray was watching the news in the living room, while I hovered in the hallway, pretending not to care. A neighbor was being interviewed. Mrs. Spill the Beans, the kind of woman who knew everything about everyone. She said she saw the woman drop something on the sidewalk while juggling her groceries. Something tiny, a small shoe, blue, with a little rocket ship on the side. It belonged to one of the missing kids from the next block. That's when the police searched her apartment. The reporter tried to sound professional, but disgust crept into her voice as she listed what they found. Bone fragments, something wrapped and stored like food, a jar filled with teeth, index cards with children's names and dates written on them. Joel didn't say a word after that. None of us did, really. We still played basketball, but only when adults were nearby. Only during daylight. And every time the curtains in 3B fluttered from a passing breeze, all of us froze at the same time. The apartment stayed empty after that. Boarded up, quiet. At least, that's what everyone said. Years have passed since then. We grew up. Ray moved out. Jasmine went to college. Joel stopped coming around as much. Life kept moving, like it always does. But sometimes, when I walk my puppy before dark, I catch myself looking up at that window. It's just a habit now, something my nerves do before my brain can stop them. Most nights, it's empty. But sometimes, only for a second, I swear I see something shift behind the curtain. And for that brief moment, I feel her eyes again. Watching. Waiting. I even called the police department last month. I begged them never to let her move back. I told them about the night she was arrested, about how she turned her head toward me, slow and deliberate, like she was making a promise. I don't know if they believed me. I don't know if it matters. Because sometimes, late at night, I still feel like someone is memorizing me. Just in case. Story 8. The evening was cool, the kind that settled gently on the skin after a long day. Jodesh stood a few steps away from the fields he tended, his face drawn tight with the familiar frown of a man who had worked with his hands since sunrise. The calm that usually came with this hour did nothing for him anymore. It was just another ending to another day, no different from the hundreds before it. He had long since accepted that this was what his life looked like now. He turned to walk toward home. That was when it hit him. A warmth bloomed suddenly inside his chest, spreading outward like a slow, steady fire. It wasn't pain, and it wasn't fear. It was comfort. It stopped him in his tracks. Jodesh frowned and turned his head. A man stood nearby. Jodesh turned fully to face him, confusion settling in. He was certain the path had been empty moments before. He would have noticed someone walking toward the fields. Had the man come out of the crops? That made no sense. There was nowhere to hide among the low growth. The stranger looked middle-aged, though something about him suggested he had lived twice that long. He carried himself with ease, with a pleasant, almost gentle presence that made it difficult to feel uneasy. His expression was calm, open, welcoming. They spoke. "Are you in need of something?" Jodesh asked. "You came out of nowhere." "Thirst," the man replied simply. "It makes me ask for your water." Without hesitation, Jodesh lifted his gourd. "Take some." "Legion." The name left his mouth, naturally, without thought, as if he had always known it. The man drank deeply, a long, grateful pull, then handed the gourd back. "Thank you," the stranger said warmly. "You are a good Samaritan." Jodesh laughed awkwardly. "That's too much." "I'll be the judge of that," the man replied. "You must be wondering what brings me here. I'm no traveler. You can think of me as a wanderer." Jodesh tilted his head, considering the word, wondering what the difference truly was. He studied the man more closely. His clothes were unfamiliar, not quite belonging to the region or the people. They were simple, but not local. "My eyes don't deceive me," Jodesh said, "but my curiosity does push me to ask. Are you the master of this field?" The stranger smiled, and the smile carried an easy joy that made Jodesh feel lighter. "Master?" Legion laughed. "No. You caught me just before the day's work. Farming is not a choice for me. My life turns around these fields, whether I wish it or not." Jodesh felt the urge to speak, to open himself in a way he rarely did. His guard lowered without resistance. The warmth he felt from the man seemed to loosen something inside him. "Truthfully," Jodesh said, "this was never the life I wanted. Saddle making was my dream. I trained from a young age, hands shaped by leather and tools. I owe everything to my teacher. He worked knowledge into my bones. Fate rarely asks permission, Legion said quietly. Jodesh nodded and continued. My mother passed not long ago. The fields are hers. I inherited them, and there's no one else to tend them. The land feeds the village, so I stay. Legion joked lightly about providing for a wife and child, then asked if his mother had worked the fields too. The question struck Jodesh oddly. He had spoken of her death only moments before, yet there was no sadness in his voice, no grief. He realized that the warmth from this man had dulled something deep inside him. Yes, Jodesh answered. She worked them. She brought me along when I returned from beyond the village. She said I was young enough to harden my hands and old enough to learn the land. The realization hit him like cold water. You're not human, Jodesh said suddenly. Legion did not deny it. Your mind has no walls. Why are you here? Jodesh asked. Farmer Jodesh, Legion said gently. You are now entwined in a great part of our journey. Freedom. Our? Jodesh asked. Legion extended his hand. The warmth did not allow fear. Jodesh took it. A pulse traveled through his palm, deep and steady, then vanished. Legion let go and stepped back. Jodesh knew the man had left, but he hadn't seen him walk away. He hadn't vanished either. It was as if he had slipped beyond perception. Jodesh stood alone, unsettled. That night, he returned home. He opened the door to the small house that matched every expectation of a peasant's life. He should have undressed and bathed, as he always did. Instead, he collapsed into uneasy rest. Morning came. The village stirred as it always did. Dirt roads filled with quiet greetings. Animals moved. People worked. The cemetery lay within walking distance, unchanged. Jodesh walked toward the river with his bucket. He exchanged nods with villagers along the way. He bent down. Something broke the surface before the bucket touched the water. In seconds, he was pulled in. The cold swallowed him. His breath was stolen. Panic surged as the river closed around him. Then he saw it. A massive hand rose from the water, floating 8 feet across, made entirely of faces, men's faces, countless layered across the palm, fingers, back, even a face at the tip of each finger. Jodesh tore himself free and stumbled onto the shore. Grabbing his bucket without thinking, he turned back as the thing hovered above the water. He ran. He burst into the village, shouting warnings. Some stared. Some laughed. Inside his home, he dropped the bucket and braced himself on the table. This isn't about me, he whispered. I'll wake up. A groan rolled across the land. Villagers looked skyward. A wave of faces rose beyond the village boundary, taller than any castle, hundreds of feet wide. Thousands upon thousands of faces pressed together, moving as one. No one ran. Jodesh covered his ears. But the sound wasn't loud. It gnawed at his soul. The groaning stopped. The sky darkened. Faces replaced the sun. The village descended into madness. People crawled, danced, beat their heads against walls, frothing mouths, broken movements. Every face twisted in insanity. Jodesh slammed his door shut and fell to his knees, praying. Jodesh, the voices called. What brought Satan? He cried. You are marked. The door creaked. A corpse stood there, his mother. Her body moved, carried by faces embedded in her flesh. You dug up my mother, Jodesh screamed. The house began to dismantle itself. Bricks torn away by mouths, beams bitten through. The roof lifted and vanished into the sky. Only the floor and table remained. Light glowed faintly in Jodish's palm. The truth came. The lost army, betrayed, abandoned, consumed by wilderness and greed. You are their souls, Jodish whispered. To free us, they said, you must act. A parchment of human skin fell before him. A pen of bone, red ink. He drew the symbol. Light erupted. The faces vanished. The roof crashed harmlessly aside. Legion stood nearby. Our peace is complete, he said. Jodish stared at the wreckage of his life. Only a pure heart could end us, Legion said. 10 minutes. 10 minutes of eternity had passed. And then there was silence.